Hello!
Hello!
Today I'm building Seinfeld's apartment, so stick around.
I mean, what's the deal with
YouTube crafting videos? I have no idea, but I'm happy that you're here anyway. A while back I stumbled across the layout of Seinfeld's apartment online and I thought to myself, I'm gonna build that, but tiny. So I printed out a copy of the layout, but realized that it was a bit too tiny. So I made the print a little bit bigger and voila! Perfect. The layout included the hallway as well, but I decided to only make the inside of the apartment. And after the shape had been traced onto the pink XPS foam that would be the base of the building, then I grabbed a knife and cut it out from the larger piece of foam. The sides were looking quite rough here and there, so I decided to cover that up with some thin strips of wood veneer. I attached it using hot glue since it dries mega fast, and the ants in my pants have zero patience waiting on things to dry all day. And it turned out looking quite nice. I used a material called foam core for making the walls, which basically is a thin sheet of polystyrene foam that have two layers of a thicker paper on the outside. I'm not really used to building things like this, where you have to measure things, calculate angles and, I don't know, take things in consideration, I guess. I came to the conclusion early on that making things look clean and pristine is quite difficult. And despite my best effort, some of the walls turn out looking a little wonky, but that's okay, I guess. When all the walls were in place, then the outer shell of the apartment was done and it was time to add some floorboards, or as we say in Sweden, lägga plank. So I took 2,000 coffee stirrers and cut them into correct length depending on where on the floor they would be placed. Seinfeld's apartment got some quite tricky angles here and there, so I took my time to cut the floorboards in just the right shape to get a really snug fit. I also added floorboards in the little hallway as well as the bedroom. When the floors were in place, then I added some wall panels that I made using the same wood veneer material that I'd used previously. I came to use that material quite a bit during the entire process of building this apartment, so I also used it to make a couple of doors, one for the bedroom, one to the bathroom, and one as the main entrance. And with the main entrance in place, I glued on the remaining door trims, as well as the final piece of wall panel in the hallway. I realized that the gaps between the floorboards were making the floor look more like a crummy old front porch than actual apartment floor. And after I'd lost patience with carefully adding PVA glue only in the gaps, I figured this would probably go a lot faster by just covering the entire thing in it. And it would also make the entire floor look a bit more shiny and polished once the PVA glue had dried. So it was a win-win. When the glue had had proper time to dry, then it was time to add some windows to the apartment. I started by making the big double window in the living room, and that was going quite well until I had to add those small twiddly-diddly bits in the middle of the window. But I didn't give up, I didn't get angry. It worked out just fine. And speaking of working out just fine, I realized I'd placed the bathroom window about 1 centimeter too much to the left. But with some surgical precision, if the surgeon was drunk, I guess, I managed to almost not destroy the entire wall, and it turned out looking... I'll fix that later. Some radiators were added under the window, and some wall lights were added on the wall, and a couple of other details next to the entrance. The shell of the apartment was starting to look good, and it was time to focus on the kitchen interior. I started by making the L-shaped kitchen counter out of some XPS foam. The counter have a small cooking stove that I made out of a tiny piece of plastic card. I also added some additional details to make the stove look a bit more like a stove and a bit less like a piece of plastic card. I also added one of those wooden blocks that you keep your knives in, as well as a cutting board. The kitchen sink was made using some air drying epoxy clay that I sculpted in and around the hole I'd made in the XPS foam before adding a little water faucet. I made a little DIY build-your-own shelf kit that would hang on the wall above the kitchen sink. It's where Seinfeld keeps his 5 million different boxes of cereal. I mean, maybe that is the recipe for success. You just eat a gross amount of cereals. Who knows? Maybe. I'll try it. I'll do whatever. I made some see-through kitchen shelf doors of camera, but those will be attached once it's painted. I also made one extra cereal box shelf, a refrigerator and a microwave, and 2 bar stools. Alright, next up, living room, and I started by making the couch and the armchair. Armchair and the couch. The main part of the couch and armchair was made by using a piece of XPS foam before cutting away about 40% to make place for the seat cushions. I thought it would be easier to make the cushions look poofier if I made them with clay instead of foam, so I squished together some tiny clay pieces before adding them to the couch and the armchair. I figured since I'm already fiddling around with the clay, I'd make 2 pillows and a blanket for the bed, because you never know when a Kramer might appear and take a nap in your bed. Whoops, that's too much glue. Using the wood veneer, I crafted a little coffee table that would be standing in front of the couch in the living room. And it turned out great, even though it didn't want to stand on its legs for the most part. I made a desk that turned out to be of the wobblier kind, where Jerry keeps his computer with an appropriately thick 90s computer screen that I made out of a little piece of XPS foam, and I also added a keyboard and a computer mouse and some other details to the desk. 2 chairs to go along with Jerry's round dinner table was assembled, which I made using some thin aluminum wires, a round wooden seat, and a redonkulous amount of superglue, of course. Then I was done making all the interior for the living room as well as the bedroom, and then the only thing left to do was to build the interior for the bathroom. I made a bathroom sink, a bathtub and a toilet by carving the shape out of some XPS foam before covering them in a couple of layers of PVA glue. That way I would cover up the quite visible texture that the foam have, and they would get a much smoother surface. And with the bathroom done and also a little bicycle I made off camera, all of the building and crafting was done, and it was time to paint. Seinfeld's apartment goes through a couple of different looks throughout the 9 seasons it was on the air, but I chose the look of the 3rd to the 6th season, give or take a couple of seasons, as a general starting point. That went for both in the way that I painted everything, but also how the furnitures looked and other things of that nature. And just like with the crafting part of this build, I started by painting the apartment part first, before moving on to any individual furnitures. Due to the way this build was constructed, it was really difficult to be able to reach certain parts I was painting with my brush and also be able to capture it properly on camera. I guess it would have been a lot easier to paint the individual parts before assembling them. But since the format of my videos is structured after the time to paint jingle, I have no way of doing it any other way. That's just the way it has to be, and will be until the day I quit YouTube, I guess. When the inside of the apartment was done, then I painted the upper side of the walls black, as well as giving the outside 2 layers of a thick coat to make sure the white foam core wasn't shining through the paint. Then I proceeded by painting the kitchen interior. I gave the counter the same light green color I'd previously used on the wall panels, before painting the countertop grey and adding some details to the stove. Then I glued the kitchen counter as well as the refrigerator in place before moving on to the shelf. I wanted the cereal boxes in the shelf to look different from one another, but without looking like any specific brand, so I tried my best to give the boxes individual designs that sort of looked like it could be some random cereal brand you might see in a grocery store. And when I was done painting all the separate cereal boxes, then I glued on the see-through kitchen shelf doors before attaching them to the walls above the refrigerator and the sink. And also gluing down the 2 bar stools that I'd painted blue. The couch and the armchair was painted with a light grey-blue color, then the bookshelf in the living room was base-coated black before giving it some additional details. The computer was painted white with a black screen that I gave some gloss varnish to make it look a bit more like a reflective glass surface. I realized I forgot to make the 2 rugs in the living room and the one in the bedroom. Luckily I didn't make them using the wrong size layout as a template when I measured the scale, because in that case the rugs would have been way too small and looked like some hand towels instead of rugs. So it was quite fortunate that I had the foresight to see that problem in the first hand and make sure that it doesn't happen. And when I was done with the 3 rugs, then I glued them onto the floor and I continued to assemble the living room. Jerry has a lot of art in his apartment, and a lot of it is baseball related, but I decided to start painting a King Kong movie poster he's got hanging on the wall. Safe to say it was a bit tricky to fit all the details I wanted into an area the size of half a thumbnail, but I think it turned out pretty good considering the size of the canvas I was working on. I also made a couple of other paintings that I would hang on the walls here and there. Then the dinner table, as well as the 2 chairs, was glued down, followed by the bookshelf neatly tucked into the corner, and also Jerry's painting of a really happy baseball player above his computer desk. The bathtub, the toilet and the sink was painted white, as well as given a layer of gloss varnish before being attached in the bathroom. And I also added a shower curtain above the bathtub that I'd made off camera. Jerry have a bicycle hanging in front of a painting next to the bathroom, so I painted my little bicycle green with some silver details, as well as giving it some gloss varnish for extra shine before gluing it onto the wall. Then the only thing left to paint was the furniture in the bedroom before everything was done. So I just want to take time to say thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please consider leaving a like on the video, or perhaps subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again really soon. Here are the final results.